Welcome to today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. This is something you really want to pay attention to today, which is Sunday, and tomorrow, Monday. The risks have been elevated, the storm chances expanded and increased, so just pay attention here, and we'll get you through this. And two areas are actually under the gun for today and tomorrow that kind of overlap a little bit. So if you live in these areas, you'll really want to pay attention. So let's get into it. Today, Sunday, you're seeing how the severe weather threat is laid out. We have a level 3 out of 5 in the orange area, covers much of Nebraska, up into Iowa, parts of northern Kansas too, with a level 2 that kind of extends down along the dry line into parts of Oklahoma, even down into the Texas Panhandle. We also have this marginal risk here from Atlanta south to Tampa and almost down to southern Florida's tip. I just wanted to point that out as well. If we zoom in, though, on the real hazard here, this is the level 3 area. What's interesting here is we have this little lobe or kind of finger of activity here that the Storm Prediction Center has identified as a potential area because of a disturbance moving out of Iowa into that area later on today. That could happen, but certainly the level 3 right here catches your attention, and it should. That's where the highest tornado risk is located. And we have a 15% chance of a tornado, any intensity, within a 25-mile point in that red area. And I'll zoom in on that here right now. We also have this other little isolated area that I'll zoom in on as well. So if we do that, we see that I kept the shading and added the intensity estimations. So the shading, the 15% chance, goes from Sioux Falls to Sioux City to Norfolk, almost down to Omaha and Lincoln. Stops right around I-80 or so. And the intensity that the Storm Prediction Center expects out of these tornadoes breaks down like this. So again, leans very heavily toward weaker tornadoes, sure, but there's a 14% chance of an EF2 and a non-zero chance, 6% chance of something EF3 or higher. So that's the breakdown for that area. Now, this area over here in Michigan, probability is lower, that the brown is 5%. But the intensity level is the same. So again, to explain that, the probability of any tornado is kind of separate from the intensity, because what this is saying is that there's a higher probability of a tornado here, lower down here in the green, but if one occurs in either area, the intensity is likely to be about the same. That's how you interpret that. So we go over to Nadocast and take a look at what it says, and it certainly does put a bullseye right there in northwest Iowa with the hatched area right here. 10% chance of an EF2 or greater. So they are mirroring what what the Storm Prediction Center is saying for the most part. If we take a look at StormNet, it does show a maximum from 8 to 9 tonight of tornado risk. There are risks on the other side of this. I just picked the one that has the most coverage and the most percentage. And so we're looking at probably about 35 or so in there somewhere in the ballpark, north of Fort Dodge there, and getting into southern Minnesota. So for today, there's also a hail risk. The highest is the 30% chance of a hailstone 1 inch or greater. That same area basically as the enhanced area, and they have not pulled the trigger on anything larger than level 1 intensity on the hail, but that still could, about a third of a chance of getting that up close to 2 inches on the diameter of the hail in those areas. Nadocast does have a hail product as well, and they maximize the probabilities here very high. It's 60% chance of severe hail right there, just off to the west of Lincoln, around Grand Island and south into Kansas. The hatched indicates a 10% chance of 2 inch or greater hail in that area. Wind risk is there too, 30% chance. Again, in the core of that, in that enhanced area, basically that orange coloring I showed you. And again, the wind intensity is staying on the low level intensity. And again, I have not made the hatching explainer for that. But just know that, again, the probability of severe wind is highest where it's red. The intensity, though, is just as equal down here along where these hatched areas are. And if we take a look today at the severe weather probabilities from CSU, a tornado threat is lifted a little more north into southern Minnesota and down into Nebraska, of course, with the hail risk maximized right around Lincoln, and the wind risk in that same general area, except extending up to the northeast. Here is how the HRRR sees the 500 millibar today. So the main disturbance that's going to cause the trouble tomorrow is still coming around the bend there in Northern California. But we have several little disturbances. We have one right there And there's another one right there, and there's another one right there. And each of these, there's even something coming around, I think, here. Each of these, as they circulate around, have the potential to impact the severe weather. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see how each of these interacts. But what I do know is that each of those is going over this, a CAPE value that at 4 o'clock will be extremely high. So 3,000, 4,000 CAPEs there in Nebraska and Iowa. And so, the northern extent of all this severe weather, by the way, is defined by a front right there. And again, the Storm Prediction Center kind of mentions that. How far north will that go? That applies over here to Michigan, too, where they did put that tornado risk. It looks like that might get a little more unstable than maybe this model is suggesting. I'll just show you 2 radars here. At 4 o'clock, we should have some ongoing supercells there in southern South Dakota, maybe into northern Nebraska, a trailing kind of a boundary right there. And again, some indications of some storms that are over there in Michigan. And then 2 hours later, that kind of marches forward. And this will become a wind bag, basically, which just means that it just becomes a line of storms, much more likely to produce severe winds, but equally possible to produce hail and embedded tornadoes in that as well. Now, let's get to tomorrow. This is the high-risk day. Let me clarify that. There is a high risk. That's the 5. The higher risk day, the highest of the outlooks. There we go. Level 4, and I'll zoom in on that in a second, but that basically covers northeast Kansas with the enhanced from central Iowa down to Oklahoma. And there's a tornado risk embedded in that. That's pretty high as well. This is a large brush of slight risk. The yellow covers almost all of Wisconsin, much of Michigan, all the way down to Texas. So a pretty big event on Monday with a strong jet stream and lots of unstable air. The tornado risk is currently at 15% for this area from Wichita north into extreme southwest Iowa, almost to Omaha. It would include Manhattan, Topeka, Lawrence, those areas here. Lincoln and Omaha are kind of on the edge of that a little bit, but again, give or take a county or two, always on these. So that's the area worth watching. They have put a SIG 2 intensity level out. So the larger hatching right here is the significance 1. And you can just see what happens here. So on intensity 1, the percentages change. So you can say EF1 has 37%, and then it drops by 4 percentage points on intensity 2. EF2 was 14. It jumps up 4. You see, so it shifts. Whereas the EF3 probabilities were at 5% on the lower intensity scale. Now they're up to 9. So they all go up by a 4, and EF4 plus just goes up by 2. But still, again, you get the idea that they're nesting these so that not only is the higher probability for tornadoes right here in the red, but the intensity level overlaps that to a second level. I have not seen this year intensity 3. Not sure I will with this. But the fact that it's a moderate risk is pretty significant for tomorrow. I will break this tornado risk down into 2, so I want to show you this is from 5 to 6. So this is a specific hour on StormNet right here where that highest probability is located. And then if we take a look at a broader brush from 7 p.m. that night, Monday night, to all the way to the next morning, that's where the percentage is. So it certainly shifts into Iowa and northwest Missouri during that time. Severe hail risk is 45% in this area here, so some big hail is going to be forecast here for sure. Although, yes, there is a second intensity level. Oh, shoot, I didn't make it. Anyway, I only put the first intensity level in. But again, just like the tornado, this embedded one right here would just up the percentages on 2-inch to 3.5-inch hail and lower the percentages here. So you get the idea. On the wind risk side, again, a big wind machine here is possible by Monday getting into the evening and overnight hours with a 30% chance of severe wind. CSU, pretty much in agreement with the tornado risk, except they extend a 15% all the way up almost to northeast Iowa, so a little bit more extensive. The hail they agree on, a little bit more down to Oklahoma, and the wind is almost mirroring what I showed you earlier. So here's what the 500 millibar flow will look like, at least according to the NAM. I think I grabbed 18Z on this one. Yeah, I think I did. Anyway, shortwave trough, very well situated. We have air aloft that's diverging away, so we have a large-scale lift going on here. A lot of things, in fact, are just kind of eyeballing it. Like if I didn't know anything else about this situation, I looked at this, I would say, yeah, severe weather. Let's look deeper, certainly. The unstable air is there. The Cape values are very, very high. Forecast tomorrow to be 4,000 to 4,500 southern Iowa down into Kansas. So it'll be an interesting day. I usually do mention my chase plans. I'm not going today. This is a 2-day event for my son and I. So we're going to go see a concert. Actually, Styx and Cheap Trick, and that's down in Arkansas tonight. And then he's my best wingman, so he's coming along with me for Monday. So we're going to be chasing this stuff, getting up from Rogers and going northwest. Anyway, that's the Cape Valleys are very, very high. We'll probably end up right in here somewhere. I just don't know exactly where. That was actually way too big of a circle. I need to lower that. Probably northeast Kansas as a good starting point. Get up there by about noon or 1 o'clock just to give myself time, because I do think the storms will initiate early according to a lot of the guidance I've seen, maybe as early as 2, 3 o'clock. And even if it's earlier than that, I want to be ready. Okay, turning the page. Tuesday, we do have this thunderstorm risk of a slight risk that covers a large part of Michigan all the way down to Dallas. It includes probably the southeastern 2/3 of Missouri, and then Springfield is here where I live. So we'll be watching storms generate here and then move off to the east and southeast as the day progresses. They paint a little bit of a tornado risk there in Arkansas on Tuesday. You can keep an eye on that. Also in New England and upstate New York, and the hail and the wind go along with the front. And then a couple more things Wednesday, maybe some severe weather risk worth talking about on the high plains of Texas. And then we'll go to the NIU graphics here. May 17th through the 23rd, still pretty active from Iowa to Texas for that week coming. So that's the next 2 days is what most of that is. And then the week after that, again, maybe kind of stunted down a little bit, but Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, still pretty high supercell accumulations during that week. And then it looks like it settles down a little bit May 31st through June 6th, but I wouldn't trust that at all. It's a 3-week forecast that can change radically, and I find it hard to believe anything I've seen that would, really take the first week of June and subdue it much at all. But we'll wait and see, of course. That's the forecast discussion for today. Just stay alert today and check the latest forecast in your area, certainly always. Thanks for watching today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. This is published every day after the morning Storm Prediction Center update. Also, remember to check that site off on day 1 because they update it fairly frequently. If you like this video, please like it. Also, you can subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.